Monday mornings at Hartwell Technologies always felt like a race against time. Employees hurried through the gleaming lobby with laptops in hand, hoping to avoid the sharp gaze of CEO Claire Hart. Known across the business world as one of the youngest billionaire executives, Claire had built her reputation on discipline, precision, and impossibly high standards. She believed success belonged only to those who demanded excellence from themselves and everyone around them. As she stepped out of her black luxury sedan, the staff immediately straightened their posture. Conversations stopped. Security guards nodded respectfully while assistants rushed to keep pace with her. Near the entrance, a maintenance worker quietly pushed a cleaning cart across the polished marble floor. Wearing a simple navy blue janitor's uniform, Ethan Walker carefully wiped away muddy footprints left by the morning crowd. He moved with calm efficiency, making sure no one slipped on the freshly cleaned surface. Claire barely glanced at him. To her, he was just another invisible employee, someone responsible for keeping the building spotless while executives made the important decisions upstairs. At that very moment, Ethan's phone vibrated. He smiled as he answered. "Good morning, Lily." A cheerful 12-year-old voice burst through the speaker. "Dad, don't forget tonight. My science project presentation starts at 6. "I remember," Ethan replied warmly. "I'll be there before anyone else." "You always say that, and I always keep my promises." Lily giggled before wishing him a good day and hanging up. Ethan slipped the phone back into his pocket, feeling the familiar warmth that only his daughter could bring. Since losing his wife several years earlier, Lily had become the center of his world. Every extra shift, every sacrifice, and every difficult day had one purpose: to give her the stable, loving life she deserved. As Ethan continued working, two young executives walked past. "Hard to believe someone spends all day cleaning floors," one whispered. "I'd lose my mind." Ethan heard the comment but simply smiled. Experience had taught him that people often judged what they didn't understand. A sudden voice echoed through the lobby. "Maintenance." Claire stood near the revolving doors, looking down at a small coffee stain on the marble. "This should have been cleaned already." "I'm sorry, ma'am," Ethan said politely, walking over with a cloth. "I'll take care of it immediately." She watched him silently for a moment before saying, almost absent-mindedly, "I'd never date a janitor." Several nearby employees laughed awkwardly, unsure how to react. Ethan paused only briefly before continuing to wipe the floor. "I understand," he replied calmly. There was no anger in his voice, no embarrassment, only quiet dignity. Claire turned and walked toward the elevators without another word, convinced the conversation was already forgotten. But the people standing nearby couldn't stop thinking about Ethan's reaction. Instead of arguing or defending himself, he had simply continued doing his job with professionalism and grace. None of them, not Claire, not the executives, not the employees watching from across the lobby, had the slightest idea that the quiet janitor they had just dismissed carried a past filled with extraordinary talent, heartbreaking sacrifice, and a secret that would soon change everything they believed about him. The rest of the morning passed like any other at Hartwell Technologies, but Claire's careless remark continued to circulate through the building. A few employees laughed about it in the break room, while others felt uncomfortable. Ethan, however, never mentioned it again. He quietly finished polishing the lobby, emptied trash bins, and made his way through the endless hallways with the same calm expression he wore every day. Around noon, an urgent alarm echoed through the headquarters. The company's main production control system had suddenly gone offline. Within minutes, managers rushed into the executive conference room. Computer monitors flashed warning messages, engineers searched through lines of code, and nervous voices filled the room. "If we can't restart the system within an hour," the operations director said anxiously, "we'll lose millions of dollars in delayed production." Claire remained composed, but even she could see the growing panic. "Call every senior engineer," she ordered. "I want solutions, not excuses." For nearly 2 hours, specialists worked non-stop. They rebooted servers, replaced hardware modules, and tested backup systems, but nothing worked. The failure was unlike anything they had encountered before. Meanwhile, Ethan was replacing light bulbs in a nearby hallway when he noticed several technicians running toward the server room. Curious, he glanced through the open door. On one of the monitors, a familiar diagnostic code flashed repeatedly. Ethan stopped. He recognized it instantly. Years ago, he had seen the exact same sequence during the early development of a manufacturing control network. It wasn't a hardware failure at all. It was a safety protocol that had accidentally locked the system after receiving conflicting sensor data. He quietly approached one of the engineers. Excuse me. The exhausted engineer barely looked at him. This area is restricted. I think I know what's causing the shutdown. The engineer sighed impatiently. Thanks, but we've got experts handling it. Before Ethan could respond, another warning alarm sounded throughout the room. Someone shouted, the backup system just failed too. Claire entered moments later, her expression growing more serious. No progress. The chief engineer shook his head. I'm afraid not. Ethan hesitated before speaking again. If you isolate sensor group C and manually reset the synchronization controller, the system should unlock itself. Several engineers exchanged amused looks. One of them whispered, since when do janitors diagnose industrial control systems? A few people chuckled. Claire folded her arms. And how exactly would you know that? Ethan answered honestly. I've worked with systems like this before. His calm confidence briefly caught her attention, but she quickly dismissed the idea. This isn't the time for guessing. Just then, the company's elderly chairman, Richard Bennett, entered the room after hearing about the crisis. He looked around and noticed Ethan standing quietly near the doorway. To everyone's surprise, the chairman asked, what does Ethan think? The room fell completely silent. Claire looked puzzled. You know him, Mr. Bennett nodded slowly. I trust his judgment. The executives stared at one another in confusion. Claire hesitated. Every expert in the building had already failed, and valuable time was slipping away. Finally, she sighed. Fine. She turned toward Ethan. You have 5 minutes. Without showing the slightest sign of excitement, Ethan walked calmly toward the main control console. Every eye in the room followed him, unaware that the quiet janitor was about to accomplish something no one else in the company had been able to do. The conference room fell completely silent as Ethan stepped toward the control console. Dozens of executives, engineers, and department heads watched him with skeptical expressions. To most of them, he was still nothing more than the building's janitor. Ethan studied the diagnostic screen for only a few seconds. Then he smiled faintly. It's exactly what I thought. He picked up a keyboard and began typing with remarkable confidence. His fingers moved quickly through command windows that most people in the room had never even seen before. One engineer whispered, how does he know those commands? Another quietly replied, I have no idea. Ethan opened the system logs and pointed at a single line buried among thousands of entries. There. Everyone leaned closer. The synchronization controller is receiving duplicate signals from sensor group C. The safety protocol assumes the factory is operating under dangerous conditions, so it locked every production line to prevent equipment damage. The chief engineer frowned. We checked the sensors. You checked the hardware, Ethan answered calmly. You didn't check the timing sequence. He entered a few more commands before disconnecting the faulty signal and resetting the synchronization controller manually. For a moment, nothing happened. The room held its breath. Then one monitor flashed green. Another followed. Within seconds, every warning message disappeared. Production servers came back online one after another. The giant display at the front of the room changed from bright red to green. System status. Operational. Cheers erupted across the room. Employees who had spent hours fighting the failure couldn't believe what they were seeing. It's working. We're back online. The production lines are restarting. The operations director checked the live data. Incredible. Every factory is responding. Claire stood frozen. The impossible had just happened. A problem that had defeated the company's best engineers had been solved in less than 5 minutes by the man she had dismissed that very morning. She slowly walked toward Ethan. You really fixed it. Ethan nodded politely. I'm glad I could help. There was no arrogance in his voice. No desire to prove anyone wrong. Only quiet satisfaction that the crisis was over. Just then, Chairman Richard Bennett stepped forward with a smile that suggested he had been waiting years for this moment. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, allow me to introduce someone many of you should have known long ago. Everyone turned toward him. 15 years ago, before Hartwell Technologies became an international company, Ethan Walker served as our lead systems engineer. Gasps filled the room. He designed the original architecture that still powers our manufacturing network today. Much of what this company has built rests on ideas that came from him. Claire's eyes widened in disbelief. She looked at Ethan, then back at the chairman. If that's true, why is he working here as a janitor? The chairman's smile faded. Because life isn't always fair. Ethan lowered his eyes but said nothing. The room remained silent, sensing that behind those simple words lay a painful story no one had ever bothered to ask about. For the first time since becoming CEO, Claire realized she had judged a person's worth by a uniform instead of their character. And as she watched Ethan quietly return the keyboard to the desk, she couldn't shake the feeling that meeting him was about to change far more than just her company, it was about to change her own heart forever.